Hello, this is Professor Fitzmaurice. As you matriculate through this class, you will be writing a number of papers as assignments. The following slides will assist you in following the proper procedure for writing a scholarly paper, as well as avoiding the common pitfalls that students make while writing. As previously stated, the study of history requires that you be able to write essays that analyze, summarize, and synthesize historical events, historical documents, and their meaning. However, writing essays on history is hardly a stream of consciousness exercise. It requires that you adhere to the scholarly rules of writing a paper. There are several manuals that can assist you in writing a paper. I am most fond of the Chicago Manual of Style, but some of you may be more familiar with Kate Turabian or Strunk and White's Elements of Style. It is your choice as to which style manual you wish to follow, but please make sure that you are following the proper style. Now, let us take a look at the document. The document that you see here was written by a student some years ago, and I call it the dummy document. However, that is not a qualitative assessment of a particular student, and the paper did not have all the errors on here that I shall point out to you. I took the document and essentially messed it up, inserting all the common errors that students commit in writing their papers. Now, let us take a look at the document. One of the first things you will notice about the document are the fonts. The font you see being used here is Comic Sans. That is not a scholarly font for a history paper. Don't get cute with your fonts. Get cute with your writing. Limit the fonts you use to Times New Roman, Arial, Garamond, or some similar font. You also want to make sure that the size of the font is no smaller than 11 point and no larger than 14 point. Looking at the body of the essay, you will see that the line spacing is greater than double spaced. The body of the essay should be double spaced, not more and not less. So now you can tell that I have fixed the font to Times New Roman and made it 12 point. Again, Arial, Garamond, or some other similar font like that is perfectly okay. I have also fixed the spacing to double spaced. Now, looking at the paper again, you will notice that the margins of the paper are very much out of whack. The left margin is over 1.5 inches from the edge of the paper, while the top margin is over 1.25 inches from the top edge, and the right margin ending near the edge of the paper. You will also notice that the heading is double spaced. That really is too much. Headings should be single spaced, although the manuals do allow you to double space them. The margins of the paper should be 1 inch all around, as we have done here. We also want to right justify and single space the heading, and then left justify and double space the body of the essay. Now we have fixed the margins of the paper, even though you are not able to see the bottom of the paper. We have also fixed the spacing of the heading to single spaced. When you write an essay, a title is absolutely necessary in writing the paper. Provide a title to the paper. Be creative if you wish. Even being a bit twisted shows original thinking and gets your paper off to a proper start for many professors. You see above that the student provided a simple title, The Death of Socrates, which is more than adequate. You also see the fact that the title is italicized. That is because the title references a painting titled The Death of Socrates. Book titles, long plays, epic poems, magazine and periodical titles, paintings, and such are italicized. If this paper had referenced a short story, a poem, a magazine article, a short play, or a book chapter, it would not be italicized but placed in quotation marks. The second issue on this slide is that the opening paragraph is not indented. All paragraphs should be indented by ½ inch at the beginning, and you achieve that simply by hitting your Tab key on the keyboard. Microsoft Word's automatic setting is ½ inch for a tab, but you might want to make sure of that. In this slide, you see that I have indented the paragraph ½ inch. Remember that whenever you begin another topic, you should always start another paragraph. Now we turn our attention away from formatting and look at some of the major mistakes students make in style and grammar. You will see that I have circled the words "is cloaked" in the sentence. Oftentimes students write in the passive voice, which is simply not a good manner of writing. Notice how you see a version of the verb to be prior to the main verb, is cloaked. That is usually an indication of passive voice. It is actually an easy problem to correct. Simply switch the subject and the object of the sentence, or provide a suitable subject of the sentence. Instead of writing "the sage is cloaked in white," write instead "the artist cloaks the sage in white." Notice that you have said the exact same thing, but you have now done it with active voice, which is a much stronger and more scholarly manner of writing. Thus, we have changed the sentence to the active voice, as well as made a slight adjustment to the prepositional phrase to better specify who exactly is reaching for the cup. Another issue students often struggle with is wordiness. This seems to be a minor issue, but it often can make an essay difficult to read. Notice how I have circled a sense of courage. The reason I did this was because right after those words, the student had put down simply calmness with no modifier. Let's make both courage and calmness stand alone without modifiers here. Having fixed the sentence to read with courage and calmness, we then move to the next sentence and a frequent issue encountered in writing: noun-verb agreement. Looking at the sentence, the strength that Socrates retains even at the gates of death exemplify the philosopher's own victory over death. You will see that I have circled the noun strength and the verb exemplify. Remember to identify your subject noun and your predicate verb right away. When the subject is singular, such as strength, the verb usually has an S or an IES at the end of it. Thus, the sentence should read, "The strength that Socrates retains even at the gates of death exemplifies the philosopher's own victory over death." In other words, the strength exemplifies. Moving along to the bottom of the page, I have circled the word "its." That is a contraction, and contractions are not scholarly. Write out both words. It is, cannot, are not, they are, and so on. The second word I have circled, on, is a preposition. Prepositions begin prepositional phrases. They never, ever, ever, ever end sentences. In fact, recite to yourself this mantra: friends do not let friends end sentences with prepositions. On the other hand, conjunctions should not start sentences. And, but, or, however. Conjunctions like that bind independent clauses together. So they usually are found in the middle of a sentence, and the word and or would also be in a list, but never at the beginning of a sentence. Now let's take a look at some other issues you want to avoid when writing a paper. Keep in mind first and foremost that when writing any scholarly paper, that you provide a thesis statement. That is, you need to tell the reader what is the purpose of the paper. Usually with primary source documents, that is the answer to the question posed. If there are multiple questions, then the thesis is bound in the common thread of the questions. You then support your thesis statement with evidence from the paper or from the questions as well. Finally, you provide a strong conclusion summarizing your thesis and evidence. In short, tell us what you want to say, then say it, and then tell us what you just said. Book titles, long plays, epic poems, and magazine or periodical titles are italicized. Here you see several titles that should be italicized. All you do is use italics. Do not italicize and put into quotation marks. Do not italicize and underline. Here you see how the titles should look. Now, when typing the essay, the paragraphs of the essay should not have an extra space between them. Set your paragraph setting to double for spacing and 0 for the paragraph breaks before and after. You'll often see 2 red lines that I've drawn between the paragraphs, and that is usually an indication that you have made an extra space between the paragraphs. So now you see here in this document, you will notice that there is an equal amount of spacing between the lines of the first paragraph and the first line of the second paragraph. And that is how your paper should look. In order to have your paper properly formatted, go to your Paragraph tab, open it. Make sure that your before and after are set to 0 points each. Make sure your line spacing is set to double. In addition, click on the Line and Page Breaks tab and make sure that your widow-orphan control is unchecked. One of the biggest issues in writing is use of the first or second person. I, we, us, our, my, you, and your are pronouns used in conversation and in direct quotes, but not in writing. One should use the third person when writing. Avoid the term I think in writing. One already knows what you think. This is your essay. So take first and second person out of there as often as possible. Now one sees in this correction how a simple few changes can turn an essay from looking like a conversation into a scholarly essay by simply taking the we and you and changing them to the third person, one, he, they, and so forth. In addition, for a number of you all, as well as other students around this university, you're going to need to refresh your knowledge of how to use a comma. When do you use commas? Commas should be used in separating independent clauses, and writers should use them properly when doing so. When a subordinate clause starts a sentence, one should use a comma after it. Commas should set off words used in lists, direct address, as well as words in apposition. Go back and refresh yourself on the use of the comma. Several of you all also had a number of fragments on the essay. This is usually caused by writing in haste or at the last minute. Please read the sentence back to you so that you can tell that it is a fragment or a complete sentence. Subject, verb, object. Those are the things that make a complete sentence. Another thing that you have to be very careful of is trying to get too clever in your writing. Sometimes the simpler is the better. You see here, when one person died, their memory lived on to haunt Kien, so it did not matter what order their story was told in. People never left. Now, that's very, very awkward, and in fact, it's rather wordy as well. Here one sees how the sentence has been simplified and made much more clear. The order of each story did not matter. Each person who died haunted Kien and never left his memory. Another big problem when writing is that when you get caught up in writing sometimes, you'll forget actually to stop the sentence and start a new one, and instead you'll start stringing along a whole bunch of thoughts and independent clauses, and will wind up with a very long run-on sentence. Now here's a perfect example. Nin, who shares a close history with the Vietnam War, serving under the glorious 27th Youth Brigade and becoming one of 10 who survived within the brigade, allows his book to be a vessel for his thoughts, feelings, and criticisms of the war that shaped his life the most, and doesn't shy away from showing the shortcomings of man rather than the glorification of war. There's a lot in that sentence, and it really does need to be broken up. So let's go ahead and break it up. Without sacrificing one single thought that the writer of this essay and this sentence has put down, what we've done is we've broken this up into several more digestible sentences. Nin shares a close history with the Vietnam War as he served in the glorious 27th Youth Brigade and was only one of 10 who survived the war, period. Nin makes the book a vessel for his thoughts and feelings about the war and how it shaped his life, period. He does not shy away from criticizing the war or the shortcomings of humanity. And you see that that actually makes it flow and makes a lot more sense. Now let's talk about possessives. Most importantly, the possessive of the word it. Many of you all put it apostrophe s. Wrong, wrong, wrong. It apostrophe s is not the possessive of it. The possessive of it is its. When writing, you also want to avoid demonstrative pronouns. This, that, these, and those are vague and unclear when you use them as pronouns. Use them instead as adjectives, this book, or that author, or this point. In writing, there are words and phrases that students should avoid at all times. For instance, really and very. Either use a stronger adjective or remove the entire adjective. A lot of. Don't use that term. Use many, numerous, several, which work just as well. Don't use the word totally. Use completely or absolutely. You're not writing from the valley in California. It's totally wonderful. You just don't need to do that. In fact, avoid adverbs as much as possible. If there's an ly at the end of it, it's an adverb. I would take it out. It's probably not necessary. Nice, terrible word. You should lose nice from your vocabulary, at least from your written vocabulary. The word funny, use humorous or unique, which work just as well and read much better. An often overused word in writing is interesting. Try compelling or noteworthy. Last but certainly not least, check your work. And when you're done, check it again. And after that, check it a third time. Read it out loud to yourself. Have somebody in your home or one of your roommates or whoever will read it over for you. Make the sentence make sense to you audibly as well as visually. That's a good way to do it. Never turn in the first draft. Always turn in at least the second draft. And don't take just a short period of time between checking it. Set it aside, then come back to it. It's amazing what you will find if you do that. So that is all I have for you this lesson. Please take these suggestions to heart, as well as the feedback I give you on each paper. And good luck throughout the semester. Remember that no paper is perfect, so you should always be revising. Remember that, always be revising.